all know, Chazal tell us that unlike Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni, they're also b'Torah, Gemilas Chasadim. But there was Sinas Chinam, and that's why there was a Churban. This concept, Sinas Chinam, sounds nice. Chinam, for nothing. Until you start analyzing what precisely was going on in Bayis Sheni before the Churban. We know, Chazal tell us, there was civil war. Jew was fighting Jew. What was this about? There was a very basic ideological issue. The Romans, they were conquering. They were trying to conquer the world. Of course, Eretz Yisrael was very important to them. But unlike the Greeks, the Romans did not really have an ideology. I always laugh. I'm waiting to see someone who majored in Roman philosophy. Their philosophy was empire building. It wasn't about religion. They were willing to tolerate the cultures of all the different countries they ruled over. As long as you pay tax to Rome, that was fine. So the nation was split. There is no threat to our ideology here. We will be able to continue practicing. The Romans were willing to allow the Beis Mikdash to stand, the Avoda continue. One condition: you become a puppet state of Rome, pay taxes to Rome, become part of the Roman Empire. Is that enough of a Chilul Hashem to fight against? Does this call for Mesiras Nefesh? Self-rule? It's a Chilul Hashem. That we are subordinate to another nation? It's a Chilul Hashem. Is that something you give your life for? Is that something worth fighting and risking the future of the Yishuv? Is that something that you can have the confidence you're going to have the Siyata D'Shmaya for, whereby miracles are going to happen, as long as you've got the Mesiras Nefesh? So Chazal were on one side. It was the Prushim against the Biryonim. The Biryonim held, the Gemara calls them Biryonim. Sounds like they were just a bunch of trigger-happy or action-hungry people. They had an ideology. In the eyes of Chazal, it was some level of hefkerus. They had an ideology. They believed that the Chilul Hashem of us being subordinate to the Roman Empire, not the issue of paying taxes, that we become a puppet state of the Romans. That's a Chilul Hashem for which you fight b'Mesiras Nefesh. And the Prushim said, no. If this does not affect our ability to learn, to teach, and to serve Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash, what can you do? We are not going to jeopardize our future over that. A major machlokes. So we read in Chazal. They could have survived for years. After the siege, Yerushalayim had enough supplies, food, fuel. The Biryonim burnt it. Eventually, there was starvation. And whatever food there was, Jews were killing one another over. Literally. There was civil war. That's Sinas Chinam. That's Sinas Chinam. That's an ideological dispute. Why is that Sinas Chinam? This is so basic to Judaism. This is a real Shaila in Hilchas Kiddush Hashem. Why is this Sinas Chinam? And if that's Sinas Chinam, what isn't? So we've got to learn the sugya of lo sisnos achicha bilvovecha. Lo sisnos alav daraisa. Lo sisnos achicha bilvovecha. An issue of sinna. Chazal tell us, achicha, lo sisnos achicha bilvovecha. What does achicha teach me? That someone who's not an achicha, we don't have this system. Who's not achicha? So there's a limud in the parsha of Malchus of Lashes. After one who was over a lav, he broke a mitzvah's lo saseh, for which one gets Malchus. The Posek says, after he got his Malchus, v'nikla achicha leinecha. Your brother was embarrassed. He's called achicha because he got his lashes. From there we learn out that until he got his malchus, someone who is over an isur lo saseh and hasn't done tshuva is not achicha. And then where it goes on, it brings psukim. Halo masanech Hashem esna. Supposed to hate a balaveira. So the Chofetz Chaim in his Hagdama or Psicha to say for Avas Chesed brings a stira in the Rambam. The Rambam paskins is Gemara. The Rambam says you hate a balaveira. Yet the Rambam writes by his Yud Gimel Ikrim. The Rambam writes, somebody who does Averis, he is still included in the mitzvah of Ahavta Le'acha Kamocha. There's a chiyuv of Ava. So the Chofetz Chaim says, Tzorachim. There's a mitzvah of Ava and a mitzvah L'Sanoso. What's going on here? Yeah, and it seems to be that the usage in the psukim, when it comes to lo sisna, it says lo sisna achicha, and when it comes to Ava, it says after l're'ach. That means there's some kind of difference, that the mitzvah of Ava is more inclusive, and the mitzvah of the Isser of sin is limited only to achicha. How does that work? What's this love-hate relationship? So he leaves it as a tzarachi. So for that, we've got to go into the sugya a little deeper. The Gemara in Psachim is talking about, we know there's the mitzvah of Prika and Ti'ina, helping someone load and unload his donkey. And the Posek says, V'chisira chamor sonacha rovetz tachas masa'o. If you see the donkey of your enemy, your sonne, struggling under his burden, right? So there's a mitzvah to go and help unload him. So the Gemara asks, why does the Posek say your enemy sonacha? Says the Gemara, the Posek is coming to teach us that if you have a choice between your ohev and your sonne, between doing chesed for a friend or an enemy, you're makdim. You give precedence to the enemy. Why? Lokuf yitzrei. Get your Yetzahar. Get your Yetzahar. The Bali Musar say, we learn from this Gemara, there's a mitzvah to go and fight your Yetzahar. Right? Prefer the enemy. So the Gemara in Psachim asks the Kasha. It says sonacha, which sounds like a personal enemy. Who is this enemy? Is he a balavera? So we just said, there's no Isser Lo Sisna. He's everyone's enemy. What then? He's your personal enemy. Lo Sisna Sachira B'Vavecha. How can you have a personal enemy? So the Gemara answers, he's a balavera, but nobody else knows but you. So Tosfos has a problem. Tosfos asks if he's really a balavera, then what's the lokuf yitzrei? Why is it that I have to prefer this balavera in order to get my Yetzer Hara? He's a balavera. My hatred for him is justified. The Gemara says mitzvah l'sanosa. Why is it that I give him precedence? So Tosfos answers. Tosfos says, it starts off that you hate the person because he's a balavera. But once you hate him, kamayim aponim al aponim, he hates you. Now you hate him, and Tosfos uses the words uboim lidei sina gemura. What does that mean? What Tosfos seems to be saying is so clear and so powerful. There's personal hatred and a passionate rejection for one's behavior. The mitzvah l'sanoso says that you are to passionately reject negative behavior. Once you do that, the person whose behavior you're so emotional about, you passionately reject, is going to feel hated. He is now going to hate you personally. Now that you feel hated personally, you're going to hate him personally. That the Torah doesn't want. That's not what the mitzvah l'sanoso is all about. That's where the Rambam is telling us that there's a mitzvah of avas reim, including a balavera. It's very interesting. Because in today's world, it's the other way around. Today, you've got to accept everyone's ideology. Who are you to say that he's wrong? The Torah doesn't believe in that. The Torah believes, and the Torah entrusts us with this obligation to use our brains and not accept an ideology that we know is wrong. You believe in something, you have an obligation to defend it. Someone else has an ideology, if he can't defend it, if it's just, well, I feel like believing in this, good for him, we reject it. And if you know that his values are off, you hate them with a passion, you reject them with a passion. Today, you got to accept everything. No, absolute truth. You got to accept everybody's ideology. All right, it's not my cup of tea. What do you mean it's not my cup of tea? It's wrong. Ideologically, we are intolerant. Personally, oh, that's another story. Got to learn to love. So he's mixed up. He's a human being. He's a Tzelem Elokim. Got to learn to love. If you hate someone personally, that is Sinas Chinam. If the hatred is personal, we're not talking about a passionate rejection of his lifestyle. You hate him personally, that is always Sinas Chinam. Yes, there was a major machlokas at the time of the Churban, an ideological one. And as Jews, that's what we're made of. We're always arguing, we're disagreeing, fight it out, argue it. That's the whole Gemara, everyone's arguing. It's beautiful. What's a Beis Medrash supposed to look like? A place where people are screaming at each other. As a common pursuit of finding the truth. It's a pursuit of emes. And what do Chazal tell us? Back in the Beis Medrash, what's supposed to happen? Milchamta shel Torah, Chazal say. It's a battleground. It's a war. As vohev b'sufa, says Chazal. Avuvno, Rav v'talmido. They're fighting it out. Basof na'asim ohavim. When there's a real meeting of neshamis, they become so close. The relationships that are built among Chavrusis, chaverim, and a chabura, where you're really racking your brains and arguing every point till you find the truth. That creates such an achdus, such a real ava love. Jews are supposed to argue. Jews are supposed to argue. But there's one thing they can't forget. We got to argue, and we've got to hate false ideology. We don't hate people, certainly not Jews. We don't hate Jews. You disagree with a passion, but you don't hate. You don't hate. The Maral Bemis in Netzach Yisrael points out that we Jews are always arguing. There's so much machlokis in the nation. So much machlokis. Few yeshivas in the world didn't turn into 2, 4, 6, 8 more. Few shuls remain one shul. Says the Maharal, where it's coming from is a good place because we're truth seekers. So we're opinionated. So we're always disagreeing with one another. What's the problem? The problem is we don't know how to differentiate between hating, rejecting with a passion, an ideology that's wrong, versus personal hatred. You know, Gdolei Yisrael, going way back when, called each other names. In the Gemara, the Rishonim, what does the Ravid call the Ram? That was the way they argued. There was a disagreement. What do you think? They hated each other? I'll tell you, I'll share with you something personal. I was studying at the Mir in the last years of Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, the Kollel of Ruchani. He was very outspoken. He was very outspoken. And he said some things that within the yeshiva world were a bit radical. He said a particular shmooze. I'd rather not go into the details. I'm afraid that we'll go off in a detour. He said something. I remember my friends, I had a lot of friends in Brisk in those days, learning by Beryl, Yerushalayim. And they reported back in his Friday night Chumash shir, Reb Beryl said, for such a statement, my father, the Brisker Rav, would not have drunk Reb Chaim Shmulevitz's wine. In other words, he would say that smells of apikorsis. So, word was out. Reb Chaim, Chaim's an apikoris, I don't know. Until Reb Chaim's granddaughter married a Talmud of Reb Beryl. So Reb Beryl came to the wedding, of course. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz walked in to the hall, and Reb Beryl stood up, maloko moso. Stood up completely. So some Brisker friends, they're like, what? Listen, Gdolei Yisrael use strong language to express their rejection of an ideal that they felt was dead wrong. They always did. They always did. Because we're passionate people. And our pursuit of truth, is with a passion. So we've always called each other apikorsim, ameyoretz. What Rosh Yeshivas didn't say about other ones, he doesn't know how to learn. Didn't like a shir, doesn't know how to learn. So little people think that means he really believes this person is an imposter. He shouldn't be called a Rosh Yeshiva. Or this person's an apikoros. This person is an enemy of the Jewish people. That's what little people think. The big people knew better. There was such a respect. There was such a respect. There was a love. On a personal level. This calls for a lot of maturity. Both parts of it. To be so clear on your ideals. To be so focused on truth that if someone is trying to push an agenda that's clearly wrong and he can't defend it, he can't defend it. It's just wrong. To hate it with a passion. To not say, we'll settle this over a cup of tea. Achdus. No, not Achdus. He's wrong. But what calls for even more maturity then is, but I love him. And I'll give my life for him. I respect him. I always have a hard time. Rav Kook used to talk about the need, Bein Amtzorim, for us to really adopt Avas Chinam. I have a hard time with that. If you say it's Avas Chinam, then you don't love the person and you don't respect him. It's not Avas Chinam. I think what he means to say is you've got to love people whose ideology is dead wrong. You've got to love people whose ideology you reject. By the way, I saw this in Yerushalayim. When I came to Yerushalayim, there were a lot of the old-time kanoim still around. You'd think these kanoim, they're anti-everything. You'd think that you didn't want to be around them. They were the warmest, most caring people. Their ideology was extreme. Their Shabbos table was open to everyone. Didn't make a difference what you looked like or what you believed in. If only we can all develop that ideology. If only we can all understand. The pursuit of truth is without compromise and with a passion. The love is unconditional. The love is unconditional. The love, the respect, the dedication is unconditional. If we can be that mature, and it's expected of us because Jews are supposed to be mature with the Am Chochem V'Novon. If we can achieve that maturity, we will see the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. We will see the Gula Shalema, the Mhira V'Yameinu. Amen.